Tonight on Ham Nation, it's part one of Tower Safety Month. You know, all December is Tower Safety Month here. And we've got Jim Idelson with us tonight and Val. Gordo talks about the Heil Parametric EQ system. Don chats with Bryant Rascoll about youth on the air. And I show you an Echolink interface that was my weekend project. Stay tuned. Ham Nation is next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This episode of Ham Nation is brought to you by LDG Electronics. LDG Electronics provides state-of-the-art automatic antenna tuners and related products for every amateur need. Visit ldgelectronics.com to learn more. And by Icom. For more information, visit icomamerica.com/hamnation.
This is Ham Nation, episode 431 for December 4th, 2019, part one of Tower Safety Month. Good evening and welcome to another episode of Ham Nation. I'm George, W5JDX. Bob is not with us this week, but I believe he's going to be back next week. I'll be out next week, but I'm here tonight, and we've got a great crew and some great content lined up tonight. A little later in the show, we're going to have Val here with a special guest and more information on tower safety. But right now, let's go around the horn real quick. Over on the left coast, we've got Gordo. Hi, Gordo.
Hi there, George. All is well. We have a little bit of rain out here, snow in the mountains, but nothing like what the East Coast is going through. Back to you, George.
Wow, that's good. That's good. We've had it pretty nice down here the last couple of days, so I don't know what's ahead, but hey, it's great right now. We'll take it, won't we, Don?
Absolutely, we'll take it. I was out working on a car this morning in 37-degree weather, and it got up to 70 today for me to finish most of the job. So, yeah, it's been a little bit brisk in the morning, but lovely in the afternoon. Hey, we've got a great show for you tonight. Unfortunately, we don't have any solar update for you. Tamitha Scove's computer crashed just as she was cutting video and basically ran out of time. So just follow her on Twitter at Tamitha Scove, and you'll get everything you need to know. Of course, hello to our WTWW listeners on 5085 and 12. I can never remember that one. But anyway, they take your requests, and they're playing Christmas music. Go to WTWW.us. And, of course, you can email them, too, email at WTWW.us. It's too many W's and T's in there. But we've got a great show, and we're going to talk about youth in ham radio and youth on the air. And we have, I'll just bring our fourth guest in tonight, our first special guest, Bryant Rascoll KG5HVO, who is a former Young Ham of the Year. And, Bryant, what's going on with you tonight? Any words of wisdom before we shuffle off and do the rest of the stuff, then we'll come back and talk to you in a little bit?
No words of wisdom here, but it's great to be here on Ham Nation with you all.
It's awesome to see you again, and we'll come back and see what's going on with you. So, George, that's the view from South Mississippi.
Okay, Don. Well, we'll be back with you and Bryant in just a little bit here. I guess right now, though, we need to go see what Gordo's talking about. I know he's in the holiday spirit. Gordo, what do you have tonight?
I do have the holiday spirit, and a very good evening to our listeners and viewers. Happy holidays. So, Victor, if you want to go right ahead, we'll jump right into the show. First of all, where's Bob? Where's Sarah? They're out having a great time. They're working on several missions, and you'll find out about them a little later on. They're both in great health. They're both doing fine. So not to worry. Our fearless leader and his fearless leader, Sarah, and their little doggy are very well and fine, and they'll be with us hopefully next week. So all is well there. Well, it was not great last Wednesday down at the beach because we got close to it and we said, I don't think this storm is going to let up. And as you can see, it didn't. so are operating down at the beach for our holiday Thanksgiving. We went inland and operated. My goodness, I got a lot of QSL cards to respond to. But thanks for all of you for being there. Hey, tomorrow, East Coasters, tomorrow, right about 1 o'clock, about 5 minutes to 1 East Coast time, the Pennsylvania School is going to be working the International Space Station, and they listen to the space station on 145.800, 145.8 FM. So if you're on the East Coast up on the north end near Pennsylvania, you should be able to hear one side of the conversation as the astronauts are talking back to the kids. So I hope all of you have an opportunity to do that. Well, tonight we're going to continue on with our demonstration of what we found this past weekend was just terrific. And that was the Heil Parametric Receive audio system. And in just a moment, I'm going to tune it in so you can begin to sort of see what it's all about. But just before we do, special note from the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC says, stand by. We're going to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking and possibly say goodbye to the 9-centimeter allocation for ham radio operation. Now, that's up in the gigahertz, 3.3 to 3.5 gigahertz. And Victor, if you don't mind, come back to me live just for a shot. That 3.3 and 3.5 gigahertz is way up at the top of the microwave section, but not the tip top that is marine radar, but rather the mesh network, the amateur television network, and a lot of other point-to-point operations. The FCC says their MPRM is going to make wave for other radio services taking part in getting signals out on the air. And unfortunately, it's going to turn off the ham radio 3.3 to 3.5 gigahertz band. But wait a minute, it's not for sure just yet. The Federal Communications Commission is going to look at all of the comments that will be coming in on their notice of proposed rulemaking. And that NPRM is going to be looked at very carefully by the American Radio Relay League, and you may be assured that they're going to help protect the 3.3 to 3.5 gigahertz, not kilohertz, not megahertz, but 3.3 to 3.5 gigahertz band. And the NPRM is also going to include a second NPRM, 19-138, and that's taking a look at our 5 gig ham band. And on 5 gigs, it's below the marine radar band at 10 gigs, but at 5 gigs, there's a lot of mesh networks, a lot of satellites right in the middle of our 3 gig band, satellites downlinking signals, the Alden, the mesh networks, very, very important to ham radio. And all of this is going to happen if we don't take action. So don't do a thing. Wait until the notice of proposed rulemaking hits town, and then we'll be able to see what in the world is going to go on with this. Because if they kill those 2 microwave bands, they're going to kill thousands of dollars that hams have put in on amateur television links, thousands of dollars that hams have put in on the Alden mesh network. Oh my gosh, I hate to think about it. So we encourage all of you that if you see a ham and he's got a little antenna like that sticking up and it's at 5 gigs or 3.5 gigs, let them know that they really need to let the FCC know that there's a lot of different groups that depend on that. Here we are at Quartz Fest, and if you look at the antenna on the left, the little stubby one, that's sending video, thanks to Gary, all over, thanks to Gary and Don, all over the Quartz Fest sight that others can see it if they don't want to get out of their rig, but be able to take in some of the seminars. Well, I want to give you a little background on this audio device, but I'm going to do it live. And we've got the Icom radio set so that it is pretty much 0 on audio. And if we hear an incoming signal, and we'll get someone tuned in here.
2000, medium power, so it's only about 400 watts right now. And the microphone is an electric.
Now, if you listen to that signal, you'll hear it's got some hash in it and so on. Let's take a listen and see how the Heil equipment, taking audio out of your rig, whether it's a single sideband rig, a CW rig, or whatever, and let's take a listen and see what happens as we maneuver the different controls.
Microphone, 6, 7.
First, we're going to do the low cut control. Listen what happens when I turn it all the way to the right. Low cut. Then we're going to go to the mid controls, and the mid frequency range. This is going to make a big difference. Listen to this.
A sheet that came down 2 or 3 days ago.
And now we're going to go for the highs, and we'll go to a point where the highs are almost too high. Take a listen.
And but it's melting pretty fast. A little more tonight is kind of in the forecast, but nothing serious. But that first downpour was really early for the season.
Certainly a lot better than listening to that. So if you, like me, have sometimes a hard time picking out signals out of the noise, signals that are just plain weak, you can begin to balance by adding more bass if they need more bass from your particular radio.
Anyway, to the question, I didn't like...
Or mid sounds.
A lot of people, I guess, build a couple of...
and, of course, the high frequency sounds.
Heat kits at the time, but that would be a long time ago, and I remember having no problem.
So as you can hear, it really makes a difference for those that really want to pick out any signal that you can just barely hear. Now, of course, those of you on FT8 and many of the computer programs, that gets along just fine. But for those of us listening, especially those that really need to tune in with our ears, this little baby really makes a difference, and that's the Heil Parametric Receive Audio System. And you play with these 3 knobs, and after a while, you're going to miss it when you take it out of line and go to bypass. So I encourage all of you that if you get a chance, go to a ham fest or a ham store and take a listen and see all that can go on with a little box added to the output of your transceiver. So that's my story, and I look forward to getting more QSL cards that I'll respond to from the many contacts we made last Wednesday with tons of rain, and we'll look forward to hearing you on the air soon. So let's see. I think I'll turn it back to, let me turn it back, and we're going to let Victor figure out who's going to get it next. So Victor, thanks for showing the short shots, and now back to the program.
I think it's me. Because I want to talk to you about antenna tuners. And then we're going to talk to you about youth on the air. So tonight, Ham Nation has been brought to you by our friends at LDG Electronics. And it's a great company. LDG provides state-of-the-art automatic antenna tuners for every amateur radio need, from QRP to QRO, fixed stations, portable and remote. An LDG tuner will match your radio to your antenna using their lightning-fast proprietary tuning algorithms. Check out the LDG AT1000 Pro 2. That is the flagship LDG automatic antenna tuner made for QRO or high-power hams. It'll handle 1,000 watts SSB, 500 watts FM and digital. It tunes from 1.8 to 54 megahertz continuously. Match Yagis, dipoles, inverted Vs, slopers, virtually any coax fed antenna from 6 to 1,000 ohms in impedance. Tuning time generally under 10 seconds. Memory tuning under 0.2 of a second. That's fast. And large, easy-to-read bar graph watt meter, 2 selectable ranges, dual antenna switch, 2,000 memories for each position. And LDG is a family-owned and operated company, and that's important. They're dedicated to bringing innovative, quality products to the amateur market. And because they're family-owned and operated, their focus is on you and anticipating and meeting your needs and providing you with world-class support that is just a phone call or an email away. And all LDG tuners carry a full 2-year warranty, and it's fully transferable. So if you ever sell or give away your LDG tuner, the remainder of the warranty goes with it. Free shipping on all warranty returns, repairs, free return shipping on all warranty repairs, too, and all LDG products, including balance and cables, available for purchase through select resellers. Go check out which automatic antenna tuner is right for you. It'll be an LDG, so go to ldgelectronics.com to learn more. That's ldgelectronics.com, and we, of course, thank LDG for their support of Ham Nation. Let's go ahead and get into the news of the week from Amateur Radio Newsline, and then we're going to come back and talk Youth on the Air with Bryant Rascoll. From Amateur Radio Newsline report number 2196. These are the Ham Nation headlines for Wednesday, December 4th, 2019. Our top story this week comes from Washington, D.C. The FCC is exploring ways to reallocate spectrum that could include removing amateurs from 3.4 gigahertz.
The FCC is looking to make more of the spectrum available for next-generation wireless networks by removing non-federal allocations, including amateur radio access between 3.3 gigahertz and 3.55 gigahertz. The federal agencies issued a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or NPRM, on November 21st, announcing its intentions. The FCC is looking for comment about amateur use of that part of the spectrum, noting that 3.40 to 3.41 gigahertz is used for amateur satellite transmitting and receiving. The agency is also looking for input on whether satellites can operate instead on other amateur satellite bands.
Newsline anchor Jim Dameron, N8TMW. We'll be watching this for further development. Also in the United States, the ham radio community and the larger tech community have lost a pioneer and an inspiration.
The chairman and chief executive of Amateur Radio Digital Communications, a nonprofit educational foundation, and an early pioneer of using TCP/IP over ham radio frequencies, has become a silent key. Brian Cantor, WB6CYT, was a co-founder in the 1980s of the network known as AMPRNet, which uses TCP/IP over amateur radio. Brian was a recent retiree from the University of California, San Diego, where he was on staff for 47 years. He had been the principal software architect for the university's network operations group. According to the university website, for many years he ran the on-campus amateur radio club at the university. Brian died in November at his San Diego, California home. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Dave Parks, WB8ODF.
Ham Radio Day is also Satellite Radio Day on the Queen Mary.
The vastness of space and the depth of the planet's blue waters converge on the 14th of December as satellite communications plays a part in Ham Radio Day aboard the legendary Queen Mary. The on-air event will include satellite operations from the sports deck of the ocean liner, which is at the Port of Long Beach in California. Hams in the area who wish to visit the ship can take part as guest operators. Bring a copy of your amateur radio license and get on board for free that day. The Queen Mary is at the Port of Long Beach in California, which is grid Delta Mike 03 Victor Sierra. The event is hosted by the Associated Radio Amateurs of Long Beach. The day's activities will also include displays of the ship's vintage maritime radio equipment and demonstrations of satellite ham radio that will include contacts made using satellites in orbit. Visitors will also see how ham radio go kits work. If you can't get there but are successful in making a contact with the operators on that day, you can receive a QSL card. For information, visit the QRZ.com page of W6RO. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Neil Rapp, WB9VPG.
And that's all from the Amateur Radio Newsline, your independent source for amateur radio news for 4 decades and counting at arnewsline.org. With Jim Dameron, N8TMW, Kent Peterson, KC0DGY, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT at the news desk in New York, and our news team across the globe. I'm Don Wilbanks, AE5DW 73. We'll see you next time here on Ham Nation. All right, good stuff from the Newsline crew. And again, we don't have a Tamitha Skov solar weather update, but I was outside today. I looked up and I saw it. It was there. Now, if you want any further detailed information, I suggest you follow her on Twitter at Tamitha Skov, and also check her out at spaceweatherwoman.com. But now it's time to talk Youth on the Air. There she is. There she is. She's the Space Weather Woman. Ooh, that was horrible. Let's talk about Youth on the Air. The YOTA program has been very, very successful over in Europe, and it's coming to the U.S. And one of the main people behind it, who's going to be spearheading it, is one of our former AR Newsline Young Hams of the Year, and that is Bryant Rascoll, KG5HVO. How you doing, sir? Good to see you again.
Good to see you also. Thank you for having me on.
Well, tell us all about what's going to go on up at the Westchester location of the Voice of America coming up very soon, because December's YOTA Month, right?
Yes, December is YOTA Month, and I'm very excited to talk about that. We currently are having lots of fun on HF with the special event. And Victor, if you want to go ahead and jump into those slides. So this year, with the introduction of Youth on the Air Region 2, we decided to join up with YOTA Region 1, which is in Europe and Africa, as well as YOTA in Region 3, which is mainly Asia and Oceania. And so this year, we're going to have a joint special event operation involving youth from all three regions. The main goal of the YOTA Month special event station is to get youth on the radio. And when I say youth, I'm defining a youth operator as somebody under the age of 25, and that is by YOTA Region 1 standards. We will have call signs all over the world, very special YOTA call signs that are easy to identify. In Europe and other parts of the world, the call signs generally have a suffix containing the letters Y, O, T, and A. But since we can't have four-letter suffixes here in the U.S., Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, and I decided to pick up 4 one-by-one call signs in order to kind of replicate that event here. And so the U.S. call signs for YOTA Month are K8Y, K8O, K8T, and K8A. And those will be operated by 12 youth here in the United States, all under 25. And we have operators on both coasts. And we will also have David, VE7 DZO, who will operate as VE7YOTA. As well as Matthias, CE2LR, who will operate as XR2YOTA. We will be on the air on all bands HF. K8Y will be on satellites. And so I encourage any operators to turn on your HF radios and work the youth special event call signs this December.
So tell us where it's a pretty impressive station that you guys are going to be operating from here in the U.S. Tell us about where that is.
So yes, the Youth on the Air camp this summer will be at the Voice of America Radio Club in Westchester, Ohio, at the Voice of America Museum. And they have a great station there. I've been there once, and it was really cool getting to operate from such a historical place.
Yeah, that's a monster station, and all the history that's there as well, being a VOA, the Bethany relay station that Hitler referred to the Voice of America and WLW as the Cincinnati Liars back in World War II. So it's an amazing place to go and just to take in the history, let alone see that amazing station that is there. And it's going to be just a lot of fun. Give us the dates again for the YOTA activity.
So YOTA Month is going on right now. It started on December 1st, and the special event will end on December 31st at 23:59 Zulu. And again, we will be on all modes HF, and K8Y will be on satellites.
Very good. That's amazing. Any particular frequencies you guys are going to be hanging around at, or just look for the spots?
I would suggest looking at the spotting networks. if you go into DX Summit, a very popular DX cluster, you can customly search up K8Y, K8O, and K8T as well as K8A. But you can also filter out the call signs to where they will only include the YOTA suffixes, which will allow you to see spots coming from around the world on all of the youth special event call signs.
Well, I'm excited. I'm really excited that you're going to be part of this, and it's just one more nail in the coffin of that silly idea that ham radio is just for old men down in their basements, smoking a pipe, hunched over a Morse code key. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the future belongs to the youth. And I say it every year at Huntsville. When we do the Young Ham of the Year award. These are the kids that are going to be running the world when we're gone. And if these kids are any indication, the world's going to be in fine shape. And you're included in that bunch, Bryant. It's been a joy to watch you blossom as a ham radio operator and all the things that you've been able to accomplish with the WRTC and now this and everything else. And I couldn't be more proud of you and everybody else that's involved with YOTA. And it's a great thing, and it's about time it came to the United States.
Yes, it's very exciting. Ham radio is alive and well in the youth ranks, especially here in the United States as well as in Europe. I mean, there are youth operators like Charles, AA4LS, who lives in North Carolina and can make 180 QSOs in an hour, just running 100 watts and some wires in trees. It's absolutely amazing. There's a lot of other youth operators out there who are very active on HF and several other facets such as satellites and digital modes. And it's just really exciting to see ham radio become very popular among youth.
Well, speaking of satellites, I bought this at the at Hamvention years and years and years and years and years ago, and I never have used it. I bet I've had this thing 10 years. Well, I finally got the last piece of the puzzle. I got the little SMA a little SMA pigtail for use on my HT. So I'm going to be on the satellites here now, and I'm going to be looking for K8Y and the rest of you guys as well. So give us a website that we can go to find out everything that we need to know.
So yes, if you are interested in chasing awards during this special event here in December, I would suggest going to events.ham-yota.com, and that website will give you information about QSLs as well as the award system. And there's also some interesting QSO numbers on the statistics page. We actually just reached over 13,000 QSOs just in 4 days of operation. So we are definitely having a lot of fun here.
Wow, very impressive, the whole lot of you. And of course, our friend Neil Rapp is helping out a lot with that as well. He's far from a youth, but at one time he was the youngest licensed ham radio operator I know in the U.S. and maybe in the world at 5, which was pretty cool. So
yes, it's very impressive.
And Neil, of course, is the driving force behind his school club at refresh me what the name of the school is, because I'm blanking on it. You probably know off the top of your head. What is Neil's school?
Unfortunately, I can't remember. I know their club call sign. It's K9SOU.
Yeah. South something. But just Google K9SOU and you'll find them. They constantly rank 1 or 2 in the school club roundup. So very impressive chemistry teacher, Mr. Rapp is, and a hell of a friend and a heck of a ham, and just does so much with us and for us with Newsline and just the youth and just everything else. He's a great guy, and you couldn't have a stronger ally in Neil and in us. And I think that the logs are going to fill up. Anything else in closing that we need to know that maybe we didn't touch on?
Again, I would just encourage everybody to fire up their radios and work some youth this December. So thank you again, Don, for having me on.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And give us the website one more time, slowly, so we can all write it down.
Again, the website is events.ham-yota.com, and that will give you information about QSLs and awards, as well as some interesting statistics. And you can also go to the participants page and see all of the different youth stations around the world that will be activated.
Awesome. Bryant, thank you so much for being with us. Bryant Rascoll KG5HVO, quite an impressive young man on many, many fronts. And good luck with YOTA Month, and you guys go out there and have fun. And I'm hoping to get in your log.
Thank you, sir. We'll listen for you and the many other viewers out there.
All right. All my best to your family. Great family Mr. Rascoll has there. So all my best to the rest of the Rascals, and we'll talk to you on the air. Thank you, my friend.
All right, sounds good.
All right, good night. Okay, great stuff with Youth on the Air. It's about time. And another big proponent of youth is our next sponsor, because as you may know, they sponsor the Boy Scouts of America Go Kits. There are 10 of those that float around the country, and they are loaded with gear from Icom. So let's hear a word from Icom.
Wish it, wrap it, gift it. Step up your gift-giving game this year and get your favorite ham, the transceiver, at the top of their list. Icom offers a variety of high-performance and innovative products. Make the most of this holiday season with one of these Icom rigs today. 'Tis the season to give your favorite ham the SDR they really want, the IC7610. This high-performance SDR has the ability to pick out the faintest of signals, even in the presence of stronger adjacent signals. The IC7610 is a direct sampling, software-defined radio that will change the world's definition of a SDR radio. RF direct sampling, 110 dB RMDR, independent dual receivers, and dual digicell. Ham for the holidays. The IC7300 is changing the way entry-level HF is designed. This high-performance, innovative HF transceiver with a compact design will far exceed your expectations. RF direct sampling, 15 discrete bandpass filters, large 4.3-inch color touchscreen, real-time spectrum scope, and SD memory card slot. The transceiver at the top of every ham's wish list this holiday season is the IC9700. Keep your competitive contesting edge with faster processors, higher input gain, higher display resolution, and a cleaner signal. Icom's IC9700 is the pinnacle of perfection. 4.3-inch color touchscreen TFT LCD, dual watch operation, and full duplex operation in satellite mode. Real-time, high-speed spectrum scope, and waterfall display. SD memory card slot for voice recording and playback. Support for CW, AM, FM, single sideband, RIDI, and D-Star DV and DD modes. Visit ICOMAmerica.com/amateur for more information on all these great Icom radios. And Icom invites you to enter weekly in the drawings for some great swag prizes like T-shirts and hats at ICOMAmerica.com/HamNation. You'll also be entered in the monthly grand prize drawing for a new radio. And for December, that new radio is the Icom ID5100A Plus 2 dual band, dual watch, D-Star portable. It's got built-in GPS receiver, independent AM/FM broadcast receiver, DV and FM repeater search function, DV fast data mode, extended D-Star coverage with terminal mode and access point mode, a micro SD card slot for voice and data storage, and there's a free downloadable RSMS1A Android app for text messaging and sending and receiving pictures and other DR functions. So go to ICOMAmerica.com/HamNation after this and each episode and register to win. You could be December's lucky winner. And Icom also supports Youth on the Air. They just wanted me to mention that to let you know that they encourage you in December to look for Region 1 and Region 2 YOTA stations and operate with them. You know, make some contacts there and get them in your logbooks. Well, this week I want to show you what I did over the weekend. This is my project that, well, it's been ongoing for quite some time. Actually, I first showed this in Amateur Logic, episode 127, back in February of this year. I didn't get around to actually doing a follow-up on it until episode 130, which was in May. And I modified it a little bit over the weekend because I'm going to take this and put it out in the field. It has been operating for a number of months here now and worked pretty much flawlessly here in the shack. And what I'm talking about is my Echolink node that I use for, well, I use this for Echolink. It's a Raspberry Pi 3B+. Of course, this doesn't have anything but playback audio. There is no record audio. There we go. That's better now, isn't it? So we have to add a USB sound dongle to get audio in and out of the device. This is just a little $4 dongle here. You can find these at HamFest. This one, actually, I think I bought from Wired at a HamFest. Either I bought it in Dayton or Huntsville, I don't remember. And I added my own little interface here. I'm running SVX Link software on here, which is compatible with Echolink, as well as several other voice over IP amateur networks. I added my little interface here that, we actually looked at it on here before, but this is an updated version of it. I just use Stripboard here because, that's real convenient for doing one-off projects like this. There's not much to it. Let's just look at the schematic real quick. We've got 3 pins coming from that Raspberry Pi because we want to turn on and off a relay to key the rig. And this is how I'm doing it. I've got 5 volts going in at the top. I've got ground right here. And then I've got one of the GPIO pins that puts out a 5-volt signal whenever the rig is keyed up or whenever Echolink determines we need to key the rig. That 5 volts is dropped with a 10K ohm resistor. There's a little diode here just for protection. That feeds in the base of an NPN transistor. Whenever we put a high voltage here, it switches that transistor so that the collector is at ground potential. Since we've got the coil of a relay here in series with it, that will cause that relay to close. Now, this little diode here across the coil of the relay, that's a snubber just so that, whenever you release the voltage from a relay coil, or any coil for that matter, it's going to send a little pulse back down the line. This diode there is just there to snub it, to keep it out of your circuits. And, of course, there's a normally open contact right there. That is running on over to the push-to-talk on the rig. In my case, runs to the microphone. I've also got transformers in here for isolation. Now, you can do this without transformers. I recommend it, though, if you've got them, because it helps keep out ground loops, hum, and potential for RFI. It will help eliminate some of those problems as well. But it's not a requirement in every instance. Now, you would think, what do we need here? Is it 600 to 600, or what ratio do we need here on this transformer? Well, ideally, you would want on this side that's coming from the sound card output, you'd want, 8 ohms. And on the other side, you're feeding the input to the microphone on the radio there. You might, you might want 10K ohms. But in reality, it doesn't really matter. When you get right down to it, almost any audio transformer will work. You might have, a little skewing of the frequency response on it, but it's not going to be something that you're really going to notice that much in an amateur radio application like this. So I just happen to have some around here that it measured like 47 ohms of resistance on one side and 143 ohms on the other. Now, that's not the same as impedance, but that just lets me know that one side has less turns than the other. So I put that low side over here to the sound card output. The other side runs over to the microphone input. I've got a little 10K ohm potentiometer here so that I can knock down the level going to the microphone input on the radio, because otherwise we'd overload it running, the speaker output of a sound card into the microphone input. I trim that by using that 10K ohm pot there. And I've got a 1 microfarad capacitor right here just to block that DC phantom voltage that might be on the microphone input for that radio. Now, I've also got another transformer down here. As a matter of fact, it's one of the same things. I don't know where I got these, but I've got one there from the speaker out of the radio going into the line input on the sound card. Yeah, same reason, isolation. You might could get away without doing that, but I had them and I like to use them. Now, here's a little closer look. This is the little reed relay that I showed you. There's my transistor. There's that 10K ohm resistor going to the base of that transistor. There's that diode there for protection on it. There's the diode here on the rear that goes across the coil of the relay. And over here are the 2 little audio transformers. I have no idea where these came from. There's actually 2 sets of windings on one side here. I just used one set, didn't need the other ones. I had no other purpose for these transformers here, but they worked out just fine for this. There's my little blocking capacitor there for the phantom voltage on the microphone. My 10K ohm pot, and I brought all this out to screw terminals here. I've got a pair here for the push-to-talk circuit. I've got a pair for the microphone input and a pair for the speaker output from the rig. And I'll just connect my cables to here and put a microphone connector on the other end, plug it into the rig. Now, the reason I redid all of this and I tested this for several months is because I plan to use this in a remote location, and I'm not going to be able to go there and check on it real often if there's an issue. So I wanted it to be fairly solid, and I wanted to know that it was going to work before I put it out there. And I've been happy with the results. It's worked great, and now it's ready to go. I'll tell you more about what the specific instance is for using that in some future show here, but that was my project over the weekend. It took a good bit of the weekend because the first time I did it, I didn't cut quite enough board there, and I ran out of space, so I had to start over. But anyway, you can use that same type of interface right there with your digital modes on your radio, or, anything where you're trying to get audio in and out of a rig. Something like this will work just fine. And I've actually taken my other interface like that and used it for these purposes. Well, that's it. That's what I've got to talk about tonight on Smoke and Solder. I do want to mention that Friday night, if you're looking for something to do around, say 8 Central Standard Time or 0200 UTC, join us over at live.amateurlogic.tv because we'll be having Ham College again. We're covering the questions that changed in the recent update to the general question pool. That is going to be Friday night at 8 Central, live.amateurlogic.tv. Join us there for Ham College. And now we've got Val here, and as promised earlier, I believe, I don't remember which episode, but it was last month, we promised that we were going to make December Tower Safety Month. And Val's got our first segment here tonight.
Thanks, George. Nice segment. So we're dubbing Ham Nation December as Tower Safety Month. Now, it's not going to be the typical tower safety we show you. Jim Idelson, K1IR, before I bring him on, I just want to give you a little background, but we're going to do this in a 3-part series, and he's done a lot of analytics behind it and where the problem really exists. Not just tower safety in general. So he's really going to take a deep dive here, and it's really something you want to tune in, play at your ham clubs and things like that. Now, Jim Idelson, K1IR, he's a long-time friend of mine and Jerry's, and also of Ham Nation. He's been active in the hobby since 1972. in all aspects of the hobby, kind of like me. He's from like public service to satellite to repeater operations. He climbed his first tower when he was 13. And he's going to kick off the 3-part series tonight on tower safety. And in this series, he's going to bring together his long experience with tower work and his passion for data analytics to bring new insight to this topic. So welcome, Jim.
Hey, Val. Thanks so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm just going to let you run with this instead of a normal back and forth interview because we have so much to cover in these 3 segments. So just go ahead and take it away.
There is kind of a ton of slides and everything, and I'm sure people are going to be very interested in some of the stuff that they see today. This is a great opportunity. I really appreciate the offer that you made when you heard about the presentations that I was doing to local clubs on this question of tower safety. It's really taken off. A lot of people have expressed interest. People recognize that there's an issue and that we need to do something about it. So, as you said, over the course of the next 3 weeks, 3 sessions, we're going to kind of unveil the different aspects of this. The first one tonight that we're going to talk about is just the question of, do we have a problem here? And I'm going to peel away the layers of the onion and show you what I learned and give you a sense for where we are on this question. Okay. So first thing I should tell you is that my interest in this was really heightened. Although, over years we had heard of different issues in amateur radio tower work, of injuries and the occasional fatality. And this is a problem that I really became sensitized to when a good friend, Paul Bittner, the Reverend Paul Bittner, W0AIH, out in Wisconsin, lost his life when he fell from one of his towers while he was doing some maintenance work. That happened a year ago in October. And then some time went by, and we lost another friend, a gentleman from New Hampshire. He was helping a friend of his take down a tower as his friend was preparing to move out of the area. And so 2 fatalities. So 2 fatalities in less than 1 year. This was a great source of concern for me. What I did was I sent an email out to my friends in the Yankee Clipper Contest Club. All of us, knew Paul. We were familiar with the challenges around tower climbing. Many of that group had some kind of issues in the past of their own. I got an email back from the president of the club. He said, "Hey, Jim, great topic. Why don't you do a presentation for our September meeting?" So it didn't take very long to figure out that doing a presentation on this topic was a worthwhile place to spend some of my time and energy. Okay. So what I wanted to do before figuring out what to say was to look at what others had already been doing. And there is a lot of great work that has been done and continues to be done in this area of tower safety within our community. A couple of things that you all may know about. If you don't, you should check into these. Steve Morris, KA7LXC, has written a book called Up the Tower. Lots of safety information in that. Another one of our friends, K4ZA, Don, has written extensively about towers and tower safety. He's presented on the topic in various forums, and he writes about it in his own blog. And finally, a face that's well known to everyone here at Ham Nation is Tim Duffy. Tim has been a stalwart on this topic. He's included it in his antenna forums at Dayton, and he comes on live here on Ham Nation every time one of these mishaps happens, and tries to help us remember the importance of being safe when we do work in antennas and tower work. Okay, so given that there is some activity, and there's a lot of information out there about the kind of nuts and bolts of what to do to be safe, I wanted to take a little different approach. So I decided to dive into the data that we have available on this topic and go through it and see what the data actually tells us. The first question we wanted to answer is this question of, do we have a problem? we know that and feel strongly, certainly when, if and when we lose one of our colleagues to a tower safety mishap. But the question is this problem of significance in terms of size and frequency that it's something that we really have to be worrying about? The second part is to, once we understand what those problems are and how the extent of them, if we can understand what's the underlying root causes and whether there are some systemic problems in the way we do this kind of work that lead us to excessive problems. And then finally, once we know what those problems are, what can we do about it? Okay, so the 3 weeks of the content that we're going to hear about will be structured pretty much in this way. This first week, we're going to just talk about, do we have a problem and how big is it? Okay, so next thing. You don't want to start a project until you find out if anybody else has already done a similar project. And it turns out in the commercial and professional tower climbing world, a big investigation was done back in 2012. It was done by PBS, Frontline, and ProPublica, an online investigative journalism group. And they were concerned about the possibility, or some feeling that they had, that the level of fatalities that were being experienced by those who were building and maintaining cell towers was above what it should be. And so they did a lot of investigation. They did turn up that was in fact true. And what I found from the research was that there was very interesting information that we could use, that I could use to help with the investigation that we were doing in our own community. The role of government, how to measure these fatality rates, some things about root causes, and the role of standards. These are all things that were covered in their research and that we would find interesting to use in our own. Okay. So let's talk first about this government piece. This chart shows the U.S. Department of Labor. U.S. Department of Labor deals with everything that has to do with workplace. How many people work in different occupations? Where do they work? In what parts of the country, et cetera. On one side, on the left, you see OSHA. Everybody here is probably familiar with OSHA. OSHA handles safety in the workplace, and they provide standards, which they build the standards based on experience and what they've learned about from injuries and fatalities that have happened in different types of occupations. They do investigations to understand what's going on, and they feed that information, what they learn, back into the standards that they roll out. And on the right side is this Bureau of Labor Statistics. They track everything. They track all the numbers. They track how many people in an occupation, where they work, and how much they get paid. But in addition, they work with OSHA to produce a report called the Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries. This is interesting. What it is an annual report that shows the frequency of fatalities for each different occupation, all occupations, many occupations, so in a way that you can compare them and you can see which ones are more prone to injuries and fatalities than others. They do this by normalizing the numbers to the number of fatalities per 100,000 workers in whatever the occupation is. So just to give you a sense for where we are overall, across all occupations combined, we have a fatality rate of 3.6 per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers. Okay, that's not a prediction, and it doesn't tell you a lot or anything about any specific occupation, but overall, this is the rate. And by the way, just a footnote here, it doesn't include anything that was not an injury directly related to work. So if automobile accident on the way to work would not be included in this number. Now let's take a look at something of real interest. What was the fatality rate per 100,000 for the tower climbing industry? Okay, for professional commercial tower climbing. So the way they got to that is knowing that there were 300,000 commercial towers in the U.S., roughly, and about 5,000 total workers. And in that research that we looked at, it had fatality information from 2003 to 2011, about 9 years. And the average was about 10 fatalities per year. Okay. So when you run these numbers and calculate the fatality rate per 100,000, you get 199. Think about that in comparison to the 3.6 that we saw in the last slide. All right. Now, what we really want to do here is think about our own world in comparison to this commercial world. That's where I was heading with this. But how do we do that? Can we come up with a fatality rate for amateur radio tower climbing? It sounds difficult. So here's how it gets calculated. We know from that 12 months that we talked about earlier that there were at least two fatalities. But we need to figure out the full-time equivalent number of climbers in our community. So we need some way of doing that. Okay, so how many? Well, first of all, is anybody tracking this already? No chance. Can we just go out and ask a sample of the 800,000 licensees we have in the ham radio community in the U.S.? I don't think so. Very impractical and inaccurate. But there's an opportunity. We can build a model. So I want to talk to you next about a model that we built to figure out roughly how many equivalent tower climbers we have, full-time equivalent, that we have in the U.S. By the way, the concept of full-time equivalent is an important one here. If you and I both work in a profession and you and I both work half-time, okay, you and I both work 20 hours a week, together our 40 hours a week is one full-time equivalent. So as you can imagine, in the tower climbing world for ham radio operators, there are many, many operators, many, many climbers who together might make up one full-time equivalent. So that's the number we're trying to get to. So here's the model. If we could figure out roughly how many towers there are in the U.S. and multiply that number by the number of hours per tower per year of climbing time, okay, we would get a total number of hours of climbing time for all towers across the country, okay? So that's the basic concept here. We would get a number of hours, and then we have to convert that to number of actual climbers or workers. And you do that by just dividing by the number of hours of work time in a year, which is roughly 2,000, okay, for a single individual. Okay, so now we have to ask this question for that first piece of data. How many amateur radio towers are there in the U.S.? How are we going to figure that out? Again, is anybody tracking this? No way. Could we go out and visit a sample of the 800,000 ham QTHs in the U.S. and take a look and see how many have a tower? At first glance, at first thought, this sounds a daunting and an unreasonable thing to do. I thought about just doing it in town here, in my own town, just downloading the list of active licenses, the addresses, and driving around to each one and seeing if they had a tower. That would take a very long time. But there is a solution. And guess who provides the solution? It's Google. All right. Google has, as one of their many tools, Google Maps. So I popped my own address into Google Maps, and what do we see? There's my house on Morse Road. We can take comments on that later. And guess what? There's a tower in the backyard, easily visible. We took another sample here. This is an address that many of you are probably familiar with, 225 Main Street in Newington, Connecticut, headquarters of the American Radio Relay League. And guess what? We can see all their towers from above, no problem. But how many of these could we do quickly? It still was going to be a little bit difficult to download a whole bunch of addresses and do enough of a sample so that we could get a statistically valid estimate of the penetration rate of towers across our ham radio community. So what I did was I called a friend, Jerry, W1VE, and asked him if he thought we could build a software application to solve this problem. And he came up with it. We developed an application that we called Tower Finder. The goal of Tower Finder is to be able to quickly scroll through a list of call signs and immediately go to the Google Maps view of that call sign's address in the FCC ULS. All right. So we did this, and here's my QTH, K1IR, in the application. And there is clearly a tower there. Now we have added a whole list of several hundred QTHs in the left-hand column on the application. And you can see here's N3FCP, and you can see that it's the house with the brown roof kind of down low, and no tower there. And so what we can do here is rather quickly go through a set of call signs and make a determination about whether there's a tower there. Now, we were pretty liberal about this. The one that we're looking at right now, you can see there's a white square in the corner of the house there, and there's what looks like a shadow, a dark shadow. We said, okay, that's a tower. All right, so we're trying not to miss some, even though they may be hard to see. Here's another one that's a little bit difficult to find. Just off the northwest corner of this house, you can see the faint outline of a tribander in the woods. Okay. All said and done, what we did was we took samples for each license class of a couple hundred call signs from each license class and went through them and came up with this ownership rate, this penetration rate of towers for that license class. And you can see extra class had the highest, general class was next, advanced, technician, and novice. Okay. Overall, the penetration rate was about 5%. And mapped against the full population of all licensees, 760,000 at that time, we came up with 37,918, which I will refer to as 38,000 towers. So there you go. Okay. So that was one of the numbers that we needed in order to do the climber estimate. The second number that we needed was an estimate of the amount of climbing time per tower per year. The number we decided to use was really, we came up with it very empirically. We talked to people. We discussed the goals of what we were trying to accomplish here. We wanted to use a number that was conservative, and a larger number would be conservative in this case. And we decided on the number 24 hours of climbing time per tower per year. As you know, very active hams are going to be climbing their towers frequently to make all kinds of antenna changes, fix things, etc. But there are thousands and thousands of towers across the country that have sat dormant, unused, unmodified, with a simple antenna system on them, and they stay there for years and require very, very little maintenance. So we went with this 24-hour number. Okay, now back to our original chart. We have 38,000 towers estimated. We have 24 hours per tower. And we have a total of almost 1 million hours in climber time per year. And then we divide that by the 2,000 hours, and there's our number, 456 equivalent, full-time equivalent tower climbers. So what's the next thing to do? Back to our discussion of commercial tower climbing fatality rate versus amateur. We've popped in all the numbers on the right that we just finished calculating. And using the 2 deaths that we were aware of in the last 12 months, that fatality rate is calculated at 439 versus the 199. That's a little more than twice the fatality rate. Okay, so this is significant and something that should concern us. However, there's more news, and it's not good news. That news is that we have to move Paul and Joe over, because in the course of doing the research, I learned about 2 other fatalities, Ken and Lee Parsons, who both passed away working on guide towers, and very, very sad, also during that same 12-month period. So the number was not 2, it was 4. And when we make that increase, it doubles that effective fatality rate against 100,000 against 100,000 to 878. So now we're talking about a 4x, 4 times level, which is very concerning. Okay. Last thing that I want to tell you about is another thing I wanted to do, just to change from looking at the commercial tower climbing piece of this as the only comparison. I decided to look at another activity that amateurs do as a hobby, and which is also considered by many to be somewhat risky. And that was skydiving. Okay, skydiving. So what is the fatality rate around skydiving? The U.S. Parachute Association is the organization that tracks and manages, in many ways, the skydiving activity of amateurs across the U.S. They do certifications, they do all kinds of things to help improve safety, but they also gather data. In 2018, they had recorded 13 fatalities associated directly with skydiving, and that was out of an estimated 3.3 million jumps that occurred in the U.S. in 2018. That gives us a rate for one fatality, we experienced one fatality out of a little more than 250,000 jumps. Okay. In the amateur tower climbing side of this, what we had to do was make an assumption that was an equivalent to a jump. So we went with the idea that a climb would be our equivalent of a jump. And so we took the 24 hours of climbing time and we said that it was essentially roughly 4 6-hour climbs per year. So that's like 1 a quarter. Every 3 months, somebody does a climb. And so you multiply that number by 38,000, you get 152,000. Map that against the 4 fatalities that we had in the last year, and our number is 38,000. That's 7 times more frequent than the fatality rate in the skydiver world. So, what's the conclusion? I think the conclusion is that we do have a rather serious problem that we need to look at, and we will. We have a lot of information, and in next week's episode, we're going to start to drill down. And instead of looking at just statistical numbers here, we're going to look at what actually happened in all of these cases. This is the history of tower fatalities in our community since 2003. And as you can see from this chart that you're looking at right now, that trend is on the upswing. It was running around 1 per year, and now it's heading into a range of 2 a year. And this is something that should concern us, and we need to understand what's going on. So we will look at the types of accidents, we'll look at the root causes, and we'll look at what can be done to minimize those risks. So that's it for this week. I really appreciate everybody listening. I hope you'll have questions. I'd love to answer questions and hear your comments. And I hope you'll come back next week for the next session where we'll really dive into this. We're going to look at some pictures. We're going to look at some graphs and charts, talk about guide towers and self-supporting towers and all the different things that come into play in causing these kinds of accidents and injuries.
Well, thanks, Jim. Very in-depth analytics there. And yes, guide tower seems to be the major causes Jim and I were discussing earlier. So you definitely want to tune in, and we're going to talk about solutions for that as well. And you want to watch 2 and 3 coming up in the next 2 weeks. So we'll see you next week, Jim, and thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time and all the effort you put into this. So next, I'm going to head it over to Amanda. She's going to have, I think she's going to put you guys to work because you got some voting to do, right, Amanda?
We do. We have the Best of the Year show coming up, so everybody needs to get out there and vote. And Victor will show you how to get to that website. It's, I can't remember the address, but Victor does.
twit.tv/bestofs.
Okay, twit.tv/bestofs. Go ahead and vote for your favorite episode from this year, and it will be replayed during the holiday break on Twit, because after December, I think 18th, that's our last show until next year. Can you believe that? Wow. anyhow, I know in the past the YL show has been the most popular. I think it still remains the most popular, by the way. Another thing we have is a message from Randy.
Hi, Randy, K7AGE. Our Ham Nation viewers would like to see the projects that you're working on. I've got a big project behind me here that I've been working on for an awful long time. But if you've been doing any tower work, antenna work, installing your mobile radio, doing some soldering, breadboard, 3D printing, the Ham Nation viewers would like to see that. So please send me some photos and a description to hamprojects@twit.tv. That's hamprojects@twit.tv, and we'll edit them together and get them up on the show for you. And my goal for 2020 is to post these in a much more responsive time frame. It's just been, 2019 has just gone away so fast. So we want to see your projects. hamprojects@twit.tv.
The next thing I wanted to talk about, speaking of towers, Jeff and I put up our tower Christmas tree this weekend, and he did it very safely. Trust me. It's about 55 feet up, and it took a bit. It took about 2 hours to run all 6 strands of lights and plug them all in, get the stars secured, but there you go. And Jeff has been sitting here listening to you, Jim, by the way, saying, this man is golden, and everybody needs to be hearing this talk and seeing these statistics. So we really appreciate that. And one other announcement I want to make before I get to questions is next week, I will not be here. Jeff and I will be at the Last Man Standing set, operating and watching the live taping of the show. So we're really excited to be doing that. Listen for us on HF on Tuesday, December 10th, and hope to work a lot of you. And if you recognize us, say hello. So, Jim, let's get to some questions here. And you might be discussing this in your further segments, but what about just becoming a certified tower climber? Would that set everybody's mind at ease about being able to do this kind of work, or just hiring out?
Yep. So there are lots of options. We all have different skills. And one of the things that we need to understand is that, even without additional training, et cetera, that you need to get to know yourself. And I have a lot of friends, I'm sure you do, who, have made a decision either to have something installed or not, and to make the commitment either to do their own tower work or only certain types of tower work that they feel comfortable with. Certainly, training is a great opportunity. There is lots of available commercial tower climbing training, and it covers many things. Covers everything from how to actually just climb to how to do rigging when you're putting equipment up and down a tower, and also safety, rescue. Rescue is another area that's covered. These are all very interesting and useful, but they're not inexpensive. One of the things that we think we ought to be doing in our community is developing a kind of certification model, certification and training that's appropriate for hams. And depending on the type of activity that you're doing in tower climbing, you might take a different course. So this is something that we're thinking about, and looks very interesting, and would be a great addition to the kind of resources that should be available to the everyday ham.
I believe that, and I really think that it should be sooner rather than later, and maybe even at Dayton having kind of the community come together to make a decision on this about how you're going to put up a tower and if you're actually qualified to do that. And I know that hurts people's feelings, and they're thinking, I can do this, but we've seen all these accidents, so we know that not everybody can do it or can no longer do it. You spend a whole lot more time on that tower on those belts. And that's the other thing is even my husband Jeff has faced this, where he's gotten climbing harnesses donated to him, but they're expired. You're not really supposed to be using those. Are you going to put on an expired motorcycle helmet and go down the road? Those are not safe actions. And I think that people don't think about those as much as they should. Don't you think, Jim?
Yes. So we need to have a set of standards for equipment that we use in amateur radio. Now, amateur radio is not commercial tower climbing. So we need to develop standards that are appropriate for us. We are not tower climbers every day, 24, doing driving around the country doing this kind of work as an occupation. So we need to have standards that are appropriate for us. And that might be equipment standards. That's also should include procedures. The way we do the work is just as important as the equipment we use to be safe.
Absolutely. And talking about getting your statistics for your towers, there was a comment in the chat about, well, my tower is a tilt over, so I don't have to worry about that. Now, is that true?
Well, absolutely. First of all, you got to make sure you tilt it over. There are people I know that tilt over towers are tempting sometimes to climb. I've known people who have done that. Again, doing the safe thing, and it is true that a tilt over tower, assuming that it's well maintained and checked out properly before it is put into position for work, in other words, before it's tilted over. We have one example in the data set, which is a crank-up tower, in which the victim, actually this was not a fatality, but this person was very severely injured by a crank-up tower that fell, and the quoted reason for the failure was that the cable failed, the cable broke. Tilt-over tower may have that kind of mechanism on it as well. And so maintenance and proper operation of those things is an element that should be considered here. All of the fatalities that we're talking about, except for one, are falls. So they're all about climbing. If you're not climbing, you're at much less risk of serious injury than if you are actually on the tower, if you're just looking at the statistics that we have.
Oh, yeah. I think you should take in some other statistics, though. I was, again, helping Jeff put up the Christmas lights on our tower and wearing my hard hat, and it didn't quite fit me, and it kept falling off. And then all of a sudden, kerplunk, right next to me was the pull-up with, a carabiner on it and carabiner on it. And that could have put a big hole in my head if it had actually hit me. And then I said, I think I'm going to put this hard hat back on. So you don't think about all those things until something bad happens. So, Jim, it's been great for you to bring all of this up. And the only other thing I want to bring up is the one time a year kind of thing where there's a huge contest. We know we don't call it a contest, but it's field day. And a lot of people all of a sudden want to erect these towers, and they're not permanent. They're not guide. And what do you think about that? I'm so glad you
brought this one up. It comes up in next week. We'll probably talk about field day. But one of the fatalities that we're talking about in that data set that we have is a field day fatality.
And it's very important.
Yeah. And the way we handle field day, the way we handle de-expeditions, temporary installations are pretty risky if they're not done correctly. And so observing some rules of thumb around temporary installations is an important piece of the way we need to think going forward. I can tell you that there are many de-expedition groups now that do not permit any tower climbing on the de-expeditions that they fund, that they go on. Everything is done with crank-ups and tilted masts and that sort of thing. One of the things, again, that I would mention as an example is the WRTC approach to towers. No one climbs anything. These are all tilted up using the falling derrick method, and it's very safe. There have been there were no issues around towers when we put up 65 towers in 2014.
Wow. And the only other thing I'll say about that, and again, back to certified climbing, is that when we do repeater stuff anymore, we're finding a lot more of the BLM and Forest Service sites are saying, you can't have a place here unless we know that there's going to be a certified tower climber, because they just don't want that on their record. They don't want those accidents. So that's what we're looking at in the future. I think we'll see a lot more regulation on that. I know everybody, I'm sorry, but I think it's coming.
Yeah, I think, well, that's a place where we overlap with the commercial world, where it's in our own backyards. That regulation hasn't happened, but we need to get out ahead of that. That's my thinking, that in order to avoid problems of overreach of regulators, if we can get out ahead of this, get the problem more under control, and basically institute our own policies that we all feel good about following, I think that's the way to a good future for all of us.
I like looking forward to that for sure. And it's going to take people like you, Tim Duffy, a lot of his friends, and a whole lot of the community to be stern on this and to be harsh on the people that don't follow it. That's probably one of the biggest things. And I think that's what you're going to run into is how do we implement this now and get people to follow us.
We'll talk about that in session 3.
All right. See, I'm jumping the gun. All right. Well, Valerie, you did a great job by bringing Jim here tonight. We really appreciate it. Do you have anything else to add?
And I did want to say certification's not cheap. Jerry owns a cell tower business where his guys climb, and he just doled out 10 grand for 3 climbers to get certified. So not cheap. Yeah. So hopefully Jim's going to be able to and get something in place for our own certification, so to speak. So
exactly, because it's stupid expensive. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. So I'm going to go over the nets that we have going on tonight. We have 40 meters on 7192, 75 meters on 3906, D-Star on 14 Charlie, DMR on 31012, and I think that's it. If I'm missing anything, I'm so sorry. George, back to you if you have any comments.
Okay, Amanda. No, just a great show tonight. Everyone did a fantastic job. Jim, great timely information there. We can't have too much information about tower safety, and I look forward to parts 2 and 3 coming up in the next couple of episodes. If you're going to work on towers or have anybody work on your tower, know what you're doing and make sure that you've got the right gear and you're using qualified people. You don't want to, we don't want any accidents, and unfortunately there's going to be some, but we need to minimize them as much as we can. Thanks for being here tonight, Jim. Great to have you on board with us. Thanks to Bryant Rascoll for being here as well and giving us some great information there on YOTA coming up, right here now in December. And Bob will be back next week with maybe a special announcement. I'll be out, but I'll be back soon. And that's going to do it for me here before we get out. Any final words from any of our remaining hosts tonight?
I do have one other question, and actually it was kind of a question/concern. You had mentioned that all of these tower problems happened with guide towers. I don't want anyone to go out there thinking that they shouldn't guide their tower because it could cause a fatal accident. Is that correct?
Yeah, the majority do happen with the guide towers, and he's going to go into that, and it's in the setting up and the tearing down, mostly the bringing down. So, but you do need to guide your towers for safety.
Yeah, exactly. I just didn't want people to think like
that's more unsafe.
So if I don't guide it, I'm gonna be fine. No, that's not what we're saying at all. Okay, guide those suckers. Yeah. All right. We're good.
All right. Well, we're good. Thanks for being with us tonight, everyone, and join us again next Wednesday night for the next episode of Ham Nation. 7-3.
7-3.